Welcome everyone to Tout Bright, the best way of improving your negotiation skills to increase your salary, raises, and promotions at work. So we have a amazing guest. I am incredibly excited to hear her story. Angie Colee. She was a direct response marketer for many years, and I think she still works in some capacity like that. And she's done incredible stuff, like mind-blowing stuff at her work. And she also has some incredible stories that will blow your mind. So without further ado, hey, how you doing?
Hi, doing great. Got the morning's coffee in, so we're ready to roll.
Awesome, awesome. And where are you calling from?
I'm currently in Savannah, Georgia. Ask me again in 4 weeks and that'll change.
Oh, wonderful. Do you have like a roadmap or it just kind of goes based on the wind?
I have a rough idea of where I want to go. It's just based on a combination of, largely circular in getting me back home for the holidays and are these places that I've always wanted to visit. That's kind of how I make my decision, a combination of those. And is it within driving distance? Because I'm driving with a cat. So
There you go. Wow. That's incredible. So let's start at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you started your career. Um, and what was
ooh.
your first job interview like?
Interesting. So I fell in, so my background is as a digital marketer, but specifically in copywriting. So we're sales and marketing writers. If you've seen Mad Men, you probably get the gist of what we do. A lot of advertisements and the emails that show up in your inbox every day, people like me. Um, I did not always want to be a copywriter though. And in fact, I didn't know that it actually existed until I fell into it. I was wanting to be a screenwriter and I was working in LA and I got laid off from the Oprah Winfrey Network and somehow came across this book about copywriting and decided to give it a go. And here I am over a decade later. It worked out for me better than screenwriting. So the first few years I would say didn't even result it because I didn't have a job. I was freelancing for a while and freelancing miserably. And eventually I decided to get a job to help me with the copywriting skills because I knew I needed someone to look at my work and help me get better. Um, I found my first part-time junior copywriter role through a Craigslist gig. And we had the interview after I had done a series of writing tests to just prove that I had the skills that they were looking for. I don't remember much about that interview, but I remember being super jazzed that somebody wanted to pay me to write and they wanted to pay me to write consistently and they were going to help me get better. Woohoo! So that was great. I happily took that first job when they offered 6 months in. I think it was a 50 cent an hour raise. I was like, yay, this is fantastic. They think I'm wonderful. But as happens with most jobs when you're a junior level person, there has to be room for growth. Otherwise, you outgrow that role and you need to move somewhere. And that happened with me. It was about a year and a half in, and I was basically doing the same thing every week, like a certain number of product descriptions for this e-commerce store, a certain number of emails, a certain number of blog posts, and it was very routine every single week. Um, and I wanted to do more than that. So I started applying for full-time copy roles. Now, this one I think you'll find interesting because so this is my first time going for a full-time role. I'm not even sure I can do it, but I have done my research in terms of what salary I can expect, and I know what they're paying me for the junior role. And I live in San Francisco at the time. So I'm like taking all of these factors into consideration and I set my heart on 65 to 70 as a base salary. I think that sounds reasonable. And it's also the biggest number I've ever experienced in my entire life. So it's like, woohoo, yay. If I can get this, fantastic. So I go in for the interviews and it was a 4 part interview. It was really intense. I met with the creative director, I met with the lead designer, I met with the production manager because they had a lot of print production in addition to digital marketing. And then I met with the head of HR. And so I met with all of these people, and the creative director within 5 minutes was like, great, when can you start? Great, when can you start? So that made me feel great during the interview. It's answering all the questions right, got along with everybody. I end with talking to the HR manager who goes, so for this role, we were thinking 40 to 50 to start. And I was like, according to my research, this role and the expertise that it demands, as well as the time commitment, is looking at more like 65 to 75. And so I imagine my surprise when they came back from trying to, frankly, they were trying to lowball me. Like that was a junior level copywriter rate that they were trying to pay for a full-time copywriter with some experience. And they came back with an offer of 68 plus I'm remembering correctly, I think it was like a 5% bonus. And I was over the moon. Like, oh, cool. They hit me in the middle of my range and I get to do this full time. Fantastic.
Wow, that's amazing. So, did you have like a mentor, or who was the person that you went to kind of like learn about like talking about salary and negotiations?
A lot of it was reading on the internet. And I did take a negotiation class as part of my master's degree. This wonderful, smart lady named Linda Babcock. I can't remember the name of her book, but she has several different negotiation scenarios in there where it was like, oh, negotiation's not a zero sum. It's not an I win because I got everything and you lose because I got one over on you. But it's more about trying to figure out where you can meet in the middle to where everybody's happy and got what they want. And so that's really how I see negotiation. I'm not going in trying to win necessarily, but I'm trying to make sure that I get something that I'm happy with and that they're happy with the result they got out of it too.
Oh, that's great. So, like going into that kind of negotiation, you weren't terrified that they would just like reject you flat out, right? Even though you knew they
Mm-mm.
were lowballing you.
I was a little bit scared because I knew that I really, really wanted the job, but I also knew one, that the creative director from the moment he met me really wanted me, and two, that they needed to hire someone yesterday. And I felt like I was a strong candidate. The team already liked me. So, I balanced them lowballing me against what's the likelihood that I'm one of the front runners for this, and decided I might as well go for the range that I want to, that would make me feel appreciated. And I learned this later on too, but accepting something lower just because you want the gig is breeding ground for resentment. And resentment is not actually going to set you up for long-term success with this role and is going to make you act counter to your own best interest. So you might as well negotiate a higher rate, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, because it's going to make you feel appreciated and valued, which is going to set a whole different tone for your work.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's amazing. Okay, so that was like your first full-time job interview that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's like fast forward to the story that I would love to get into, unless you have more, because we'll definitely deviate from there. But talk a little bit about um, that major negotiation. I don't know if you want to call it fiasco or just like, you know, so like set us up, set the stage, I
Ooh.
should say.
So um I stayed with this team for I think 4.5 years. It was a long time. I stayed with this team, and I was the first copywriter that the company had ever had. So I had to do a lot of the foundational work of like setting up a voice and a style guide and helping establish the procedures, how we get from idea to fully like printed and out into the world. And they did hire a copy chief along the way, which helped me get even better with my copy skills. And back then I was super like, give me the project I want to shine. So luckily for me, I was thrown into new and interesting projects. I got to write catalogs, I got to write TV commercials, I got to be on set while the TV commercials that I wrote were being filmed. It was fantastic. Very
Wow.
exciting time. And at that time, I was also learning more about a style of marketing called direct response, which is very sales oriented and tracking direct calls to action with like use code to claim discount so that you can see what lead source people are buying from. And I kept proposing these trackable direct response type campaigns for our very Madison Avenue branding type corporation. And I got some of them accepted. Most of them were rejected because they had a look and feel they were going for, and that's business. But the ones that I did get accepted were huge wins. We're talking like the catalogs that I wrote, some of them were multi-million-dollar catalogs. It was a West Coast chain with 100 stores. So like the audience is huge, which means the sales potential is pretty big too. Um, had a 3 email campaign, the one that I told you about, that did $8.4 million in sales. And like all of this is trackable to the work that I did. And of course, I didn't do it alone. I did it with a team, but without me, the team wouldn't have been able to produce the results too. That's the flip side of the coin. So I was getting frustrated because my then partner and I were about to buy a house and it was expensive in San Francisco. So I once again found myself in a situation where I'm looking at the salary data and I realized after several years, I've been getting this 6% max merit raise every year, which doesn't really amount to much, especially in San Francisco. And suddenly, after several years, I'm not only behind the curve for San Francisco for the kind of work that I'm doing, I'm behind the curve for the entire nation for what I'm doing. Like there's no city where the responsibilities, according to all of these sites, that everything that I'm doing on a daily basis matches with what I should be paid. And
Wow.
so I went to, I know it's on one hand, like ignorance is truly bliss in that regard. Like I was slightly dissatisfied with what I was getting, but it was paying the bills and it let me have fun and I got to save and hey, great, supporting myself in an expensive city. But on the other hand, when my eyes were open to that, I was mad. And that's the downside of being at a job, right? Because the only way that you're going to make massive leaps is by being willing to walk away, because otherwise they're just, yay, 5%, 10% a year, woohoo, go you get a raise. Um, so I did a lot of research because I'm a copywriter and that's what I do. And I put together this plan that talked about like talking points, because I always believe in preparing going into these meetings versus flying by the seat of your pants. So I had some talking points that talked about like, here's this project that I led that resulted in this. Here's another project that I concepted that resulted in this. Here's another project that I wrote that was somebody else's baby, but I came in and I feel like I made it shine and we generated these results. And in every instance, I made sure to tie it to a direct impact on the bottom line.
Oh,
And I
wow.
realize I'm going to interject there because I know that a lot of people in setting up this say, well, I don't do sales like a copywriter does, but you can impact the bottom line if you are saving executives time, if you found a way to save the company money and expenditure. Like there's a lot of way to have impact on the bottom line aside from just generating sales numbers. So that's my little aside. And I presented this to my boss. He agreed with me. He went and took it to HR and argued my case for me. And they shot it down in flames and said, we can't do that. We can only do a 6% merit increase, which wasn't even a 6% merit increase because the way they rated us and our ratings were tied to the merit increase that we would get. Company goals were part of our rating too. So if the entire company fell short on a certain thing, then we couldn't get the full bonus because the company fell short. And I was like, all right, so somebody over on the other end of the company screwed the pooch, and that means I don't get my full bonus. That's lame.
So
I
I
did
want,
my part.
wow. So I want to stop because you mentioned just like one of the campaigns and the success that you brought in. So I want to like go through that story a little bit more. I know I
Mhm.
heard it, but like I want to share that with the audience just to give people the impact of like not only are you showing the direct impact, but just how much impact you had on the company, and they're still just
Mhm.
saying, nope, we only have the budget for the merit raise.
Yes. So, and that campaign was a battle too, because I will say that sometimes in a company, you have to recognize if you're dealing with like a battle of egos or if the company is actually making decisions that are in the best interest of the customer and the company. Um, at that place, I know that there was a particular marketing manager that, and this sounds like I'm talking crap, and I promise that that's not the case here, but there was somebody that really wanted to shine as much as I wanted to shine, but I'm happy sharing credit and would do their best to squash projects that weren't their idea. So this email series that I was telling you about, my other marketing manager friend and I snuck by everybody because we proposed it to them, got shot down. We brought examples of this being done in other areas and the results that they generated got shot down. So we decided to run it because we thought it was good for the customers and good for the company. Turns out we were right. So this was an email re-engagement campaign. So this is going out only to people that haven't opened emails in a certain amount of time. And we chose that amount of time to be 180 days, 6 months. They have not opened a single email from us in 6 months. That's a lot of unengaged people. And we sent a series of 3 emails, and I was total, there was like 500 words. These are super short. One of them was a corny dad joke, the very first one about we miss you like a power tool misses a battery. Can we reconnect? Here's a little offer to come back to the store. The second one was a survey saying, hey, if you haven't shopped with us in so long, we're wondering if it's something that we did. Hit reply and tell us. And the third one was just, hey, this offer is here. Come take advantage of it. Like super short, super quick. We really want to get you back into the store. What do we have to do? Over the next 60 days, tied to loyalty and the coupon tracking, because again, we're tracking the sales, that one did $8.4 million. So that's almost $10 million that the company didn't have before. And we didn't have to pay more for it because these are people that had already bought for us in the past. So like value upon value upon value. Not to mention it was 3 emails and it basically paid for the entire department's salary for like a couple years. So
Wow,
um and
that
the
is
result out of
huge.
that, like, I know, right? And so we bring this to them and we say, okay, so this thing that you kept saying no to, I mean, I know that you said no, but we did it anyway. And here's the result. And we've got lots of happy customers and we've got lots of useful data. Because, like, one of the assumptions that we made was that they stopped shopping from us and stopped opening their emails because they had a bad experience in the store. We ran out of stock, somebody was rude to them, the lines are too long. We were operating under that assumption. When they wrote back to us and told us why they had actually stopped shopping, we were surprised. It was because we had closed down or moved a store that was local to them. And so instead of driving to the next nearest store, they were just going to Home Depot or Lowe's. This was a home improvement store chain. And we're like, oh, this wasn't even on our radar as something that people were frustrated with us for. You closed my local store and I want to shop there, but I don't want to drive that far to get there. So I'm not doing it anymore. And they didn't realize that online shopping and shipping were an option just yet. So they loved it
Wow.
when we sent them this coupon. They ordered stuff, we shipped it to them. It was fantastic. So yeah, we took this to the higher ups and said, I know you said no, but we made you almost $10 million. Can we agree to disagree? Can we do this again? We could make this part of the recurring strategy and get people back shopping with us. We got yelled at.
Wow.
They came down on us pretty hardcore for doing the thing that we were told not to do, even though it generated a lot of goodwill and a lot of money. So businesses don't always do stuff that makes sense, guys.
I'm beginning to think that's the majority versus the minority in most businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's incredible. So not only did you succeed and admittedly you went against the grain, but they just like balled you out for paying for your entire department for several
Mm-hmm.
years to come.
I got
That's
screamed at because of that, particularly because of that second email. Like, you should never say that you're sorry as a corporation. You should never imply that you did anything wrong. I'm like, yeah, but people want to know that they're dealing with people. And so I strongly disagree that we should present this image that we're always perfect. We never make mistakes. There's no way that we could have ever pissed you off, dear customer. So clearly something's wrong with you. Nobody likes that, you know? So
no. Wow.
I don't know.
So that was kind of like the writing on the wall there.
Yeah, I did make one last ditch effort to see if it was salvageable because, I started to see that this was not someplace that I could excel long term. My contributions weren't appreciated. Um, I felt like I was always fighting just to get things that made sense, especially to our customers, because I try to take that, does this do something good for the person at the end of this? I don't really care if my higher ups like it. Hopefully they do, but I'm thinking of the person at the end and if they're going to benefit from this. And theoretically, if they benefit from this, then that does the company good and my higher ups like it. So that's how my perspective kind of shaped these things. So I'm like, all right, maybe there's some way to salvage this if I can clear up one of my days and start building up my freelance side hustle. So I did research again because I'm a copywriter, and our company was owned by an East Coast corporation. So I'm looking at the East Coast corporation's company policy for employees, and I find out that they have a flexible work schedule option where you could do 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. I'm already doing 10 to 12-hour days plus a 1 to 2 hour commute every day. At times during one of those catalogs, there would be times that I was in the office at midnight and then back in at 5 a.m. just trying to keep this thing rolling desperately. So again, like, I was super committed to this company and just not really appreciated for the efforts. Uh, I don't want it to sound like I am talking shit about anybody because I'm not. Worked really hard, really believed in it until I burned out. Um, Saw that they had this flexible work schedule. Again, wrote up a thing about why I thought I could shift this schedule. It would be beneficial to the company. I would still make all my meetings and all my deadlines. I'd get this quiet, focused time to get things done outside of company meetings. Pitched it to my boss. He took it to the higher ups and ran that for me. And he really wanted me to get it to. My boss was very supportive. Um, they shot it down in flames. And the reason that they sent him back with was, if we do this for you, what do we do the next time someone has this request? And I was like, I don't know. That's not my job. You're HR. That's your job to figure this out. All I'm doing is advocating for what I need. What is going on here? Like, and this
Wow.
is company policy out there. Why do we have a different company policy from the overlords? Like, this doesn't make sense. So that was kind of the final sign that they really did not see the value that I added to the company. They didn't see the passion that I had, that I was trying desperately to find a way to make it work where I could stay on. Um, and that was just the sign that it's time to go. I'm done. It's time to walk. I still wound up giving them, I think, 3 months of lead time to find my replacement, because I had such a heavy workload that I figured they would need the extra time to recruit a specialist to cover for me. They wound up not replacing me and just dividing my work among the people that remains and burning them out. And then 4 months after I walked out the door, the entire creative department was laid off.
Wow.
Talk about reading the signs and having good timing. I'm glad I trusted my gut on that one. The signs were there.
That's incredible. So let's back up a little bit about
Mhm.
when you were presenting your cases to your boss. So you said you did a lot of research. Um, when you looked at your current salary and found that you were on the bottom curve of everyone in the United States versus how big of a gap were we talking about? Was it like 20, 30%, like,
I don't know the percentages off the bat,
or
but like, so
numbers, like any, yeah.
when I got promoted to senior copywriter, I was at 80 grand. And then I think a year or two later was when I was looking at this salary review, 80 grand plus bonuses. And I think I was raised to like 15% bonus at that time. Um, and 15% is like percentage of my salary that they would pay me as a single chunk if we hit all of our goals, just to be clear, which is not insubstantial for an $80,000 salary. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, granted, big cities like New York and San Francisco, but senior copywriters are making, 95, 105, up to 110 plus bonuses. And, in the Midwest and more cost effective locations, they're still making 85 to 95. So it really, for the big cities, I was super far behind. For the Midwest, I was still more comparable, but they're basically paying me Midwest rates, a little bit below Midwest rates, to live in one of the big major cities in the US, and it's just not sustainable.
Wow, that's incredible. So you were asking basically to get the paid based on the region, and
Yep.
they refused to do it and only gave you the merit raise.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And not the full
incredible.
merit raise, because like if the company fell short on something or another department dropped the ball, everybody suffered.
Okay, so you do a lot of research as your like prep for negotiation, but talk a little bit more about your negotiation style. That you come in and now you're doing it for individual clients, so you have to do it all the time. But like talk a little bit more about like what does that negotiation kind of look like?
I usually like to set the frame, and that is kind of like circling back what we talked about at the beginning, that I'm not here to win. I'm not here to like fool anybody. And I don't usually explicitly say this, but I will introduce myself in a way that's like, we're here. I'm not going to pull any gotchas. I'm not here to like stab you in the back or sabotage you, try to throw you under the bus. I want to find a way for us to meet in a place that makes both of us feel like winners and like we are excited to get out of bed in the morning and do this work together. So whatever that winds up being, we'll let it be a discussion. You tell me what you want and need, I'll tell you what I want and need, and we'll figure out together, we'll figure out how this looks. And that's very much how I I'm making up words now. That's how I approach all of my negotiations and deal making really in general. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Yeah, that's a good start. But like, I don't know if we want to actually do like a mock negotiation, but just to give people idea because there's a lot of generic advice out there. You know, like
Hmm.
talk about yourself versus we, or don't talk about yourself, talk about we. And, it's very controversial. So when you're talking about like, let's say you're sitting with your boss or like the C-suite, and you're like, hey, I just realized that I'm getting drastically underpaid. How does that actually like sound when you're presenting it to them?
Okay. Let me see if I can like dig back into the archives and remember how I approached it.
Massage.
So I came back. Yeah. brain massage. So I'm pretty sure when I went to my boss, first of all, I did the research. I didn't want to go in there and be like, I should be paid more, and then have them be like, what should you be paid? And me be like, I don't know, I should be paid more. What can you afford? Like, you've given away all of your power if you don't come to this prepared. So I'd done the research. I knew what other people were making. I knew what was probably likely given their history of raises and promotions with associated raises. So I knew that I'm at 80, going in and demanding 105 is probably not going to work. And it's going to result in me needing to make the hard decision to walk. So if I know I'm not likely to get 105, what am I comfortable with in terms of a raise? So like, first of all, I'm figuring out what that range is, because I can't do the math off the top of my head, but that's like a 20% raise. That's pretty big without a raise, like a promotion associated with it. So you kind of got to understand the economics of the business too in going in for this. So like I said, you do a lot of research. I would go into this knowing what my number range is. So I was at 80, like I told you, a lot of these people were making 95 to 105. So I settled on, I would like to make 95 to 100. And if I can't make 95 to 100, I'd like to make 90 to 95 with an added bonus, so that hopefully when that bonus does come through, I'm at least in that range, when and if that bonus comes through. Um, so I would basically go to them and say, so, hey, thanks, I appreciate your time. I'm so glad that we could schedule this quick meeting. I had something that's on my mind and I wanted to get your take on it. So I've been looking at the numbers, and first of all, I want to let you know that I'm super happy with the work that we do here. I'm really excited to do this. We were able to do this last month, which resulted in that. We were able to do this the month before, which resulted in that. I want to keep working on projects like that. My challenge right now is I was doing some research. I'm getting ready to move into a house, and I realized that there's a little bit of a gap between what my daily responsibilities are according to source, and what I'm actually earning at the company. And given the results that I just mentioned earlier, I'm wondering if there's wiggle room to talk about what I'm earning right now, if we could discuss a raise. So let me know your thoughts. And then I would just open it and being a discussion. So notice I didn't come into this being like, we got to talk about how much I'm being paid, bro. You are not paying me enough to put up with your crap. That's a totally different approach from, all right, well, I have something I'm struggling with. I want to bring this up and get your take. Look at how I'm performing. I love this job. I don't want to go anywhere. Work with me and see if we can meet at a place that makes me feel respected, makes you feel like you got value for your investment. Let's talk.
Well, that sounds pretty good. And so you were able to get your boss on board every time you mentioned like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he sounds like a pretty great boss, but it was just HR and the rest of the company. Um,
Yeah.
and so since your boss was kind of like, negotiating for you at that point, what was his skills like or her skills? Because it
You know,
sounds like he was shot down pretty hard. So I was trying to see like if he was the issue or it was just like the C levels.
that's a good question, because I don't know for sure, because I wasn't allowed to be in the room when he was going to bat for me. And that was another weird company policy. But I do know that each time, so like when I was making the case to be promoted and get the first raise, and then when I was making a case to get a raise, and then making a case to get this flexible work schedule, each time I would bring him a proposal and he would push back on me and tell me how to make it even better. So I really felt like he was in my corner and he wanted me to get this proposal as strong as I possibly could, make this case that's, very obvious to people that don't have their, you know, rectal cranial inversion, if you know what that one means. And he would say, think through this one more. This one is a little bit more focused on you. I want you to always tie this back to the company bottom line, how you think that this is a win for the company, so that when they're looking at this, they don't really have a basis to argue on why Angie doesn't deserve this, but this makes sense for the company. Let's go with it. So I really felt like he was in my corner on that score, because he challenged me to think and rethink and research and redo these proposals so that he could take them to the higher ups and make as strong a case as possible.
Wow, that sounds
So,
awesome. Like it definitely sounds like he knew what he was talking about, or at least knew how to critique a business case. So that's
mhm.
fascinating. Um, I will have some HR managers on future episodes, and so I love to challenge them based on the policy versus exceptions. Because
Hmm.
like, you wrote the style guides, but chances are there will be a future employee who's going to be like, no, this is the exception, and here's why. You know,
Hmm.
and they'll have to fight against people who are like, nope, that was against style guide rules.
Yep. I mean, there's always going to be exceptions to every rule, but you have to have the rules so you know where the exceptions are acceptable, if that makes sense. So I totally get it. And I don't want to disparage on HR managers. HR managers, you protect people, you keep the company rolling, you come up with goofy events like building sandcastles in the parking lot. That was my favorite day at the job. So, like, I don't think HR managers are the enemy at all.
Not at
I
all.
do think learning to tell when a company is working against itself, and it's not making decisions that make logical business sense. So, like, a business to keep running needs to bring in money. And it needs to cover its operational expenses, and it needs to have a profit margin and a savings to be able to continue to operate. And so if they're literally making decisions like in my case where they're turning down money, I don't want you to go make money for this company because I didn't think of this project. How dare you? That's probably a sign that the company's not as healthy as it might seem on the surface if you're just objectively looking at numbers. If you're looking at numbers, look at the behaviors too and how the company operates and whether this is like closed. I protect this so that I can protect my job and so I don't really share with other people versus open and encouraging and supporting. Because looking back on that negotiation, I'm not surprised that it turned out the way it did, even though in the moment I was shocked that they couldn't see the value. Does that make sense? Like with time and perspective, I could definitely see that that decision was inevitable. They were going to turn me down no matter how good a case I made because that was just how the company operated at the time.
Wow,
But
that's incredible.
it also,
So let's
go ahead.
let's play make the believe for a second. So let's
Yeah.
say that they're actually acting rational. All
Hmm.
right. What one thing could you have added to? So, like, I have a few things in my mind, but one thing that you could have added to your case that would have pushed the scale to getting those salary increases. Now that
Hmm.
you've, kind of gained some distance, between you and your negotiation.
I feel like it was a really solid case. And I'm curious if it was a company that operated in a different way and saw the value of individual players and took that serious, like, because I understand the need to balance what people get paid on an individual basis versus what people get paid overall and profitability and all of that jazz. So I'm not pretending to be a special snowflake that needs to be paid 150 grand while everybody else gets paid 50, you know. Um, but I feel like it was a pretty solid case in that in a company where people thought differently and they evaluated assets to the company, which I think I was, and I think I could prove it, that they probably would
Sounds
have
like it.
accepted. Hmm.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
feel
proving
like
your
I was an
value
asset.
was pretty easy. What do you think if you had another job offer on the table that would have offered you the 105K and you came in and like, hey, I love this company. I'm willing to negotiate. Do you think that would have changed? Again, we're assuming
Mm,
rational decision making on
yeah.
the company's part.
You know, I'm one of the few vocal opponents of a counter offer. And
Wonderful.
here's
Let's
why.
talk.
Yes, because I think if you are looking for another job, that you should be prepared to walk. And if that job makes you a great offer, coming back to your job and asking them for more is not necessarily working in your best interest. And here's why. Because one, they'll know that you're unhappy, even if you accepted the counter offer. And so there's a good chance that afterward, knowing that you're unhappy and knowing that they had to shell out a whole lot more money just to keep you, they might be looking for your replacement and somebody that they could pay less. And you might wind up getting the axe anyway, even though they accepted even though they made a counter offer and decided to keep you. I've heard that happen to more people than I can count. And so I'm like, if somebody makes me an offer and it's a good offer, I'm just going to go ahead and make that decision firmly to go with the better offer and tell them,
Interesting.
hey, I made the proposal several times throughout the years for what I thought my worth was, and it didn't make business sense at the time. So now I'm going to go with a place that makes business sense for me. And I appreciate all of the time and the career growth that you've given me here. And I don't burn bridges, even when people make me incredibly, incredibly mad.
That's a good strategy, you know. Don't hand weapons to your enemies, right?
Hmm. And you never know if the toes that you step on today will be connected to that behind you have to kiss tomorrow. So people
There's
move, they
a
change jobs, word
There
travels.
you go. A never metaphor I didn't like.
Yep.
Wow, that's some great insight. Yeah, we're going to have some upcoming guests who are going to have some drastically different stories. But whenever it comes to the counter offer, this is something that I realized at my personal job, not to get into me,
Mhm,
but
go for it.
I think there's that line where like I love my personal job and I found out that, you know, I could make 70% more with my current skill set just because I hadn't done that, you know, check of saying, oh, what do I know now? What am I worth? What are my contributions worth? Um,
Hmm.
and so I think there are, you know, I love my job and my coworkers and aspects of things like that. So I think there's um, not necessarily that you're going to be unhappy if you get that counter offer. Um, it's, you know, because like if you had gotten a offer and then you went to your company like, hey, by the way, I just want like the 95 to 100, and this other company is going to pay me, but I really like you because like that was what you were negotiating on. You didn't want to leave.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Well, I think,
you
and
know,
the
you
the
mentioned that you're going to still be unhappy, so I was just curious about that. Um,
that's I forgot to mention, and it just slipped my mind to circle back to what I something I mentioned at the very beginning was resentment, because there's also a subtle element of resentment, especially if, like me, you'd been proactive in advocating for yourself, trying to negotiate a higher salary. If the only time they listened to me and took me seriously was when they were afraid to lose me, how serious are they about this relationship? How much do they recognize I'm an asset? Are they playing to win versus playing not to lose? Which I look at that in all of my business dealings these days, because that's a very different style of doing business where you are taking smart risks, making smart bets in the hope of great growth and good learnings, whereas you are making defensive decisions to not lose anything that you've gained. It's
that
two
is
totally different styles of business. And so that's why I was like, if I've gone to all this effort to try and make my case to get a raise and they've shot me down in flames every single time and come up with excuses like they did, and then I got a better offer and I come back to them and say, hey, I'm turning in my notice. I got an offer. I'm going to go do this here. Thank you for the time. Lovely people. Please keep in touch. And they go, okay, counter offer. We don't want to lose you. Why didn't you want to lose me? Why didn't you care about losing me before?
yeah,
Why did it
it's
have to
a
get here for me to decide to walk away for you to care? And so that impacts me
wow.
saying like I'm unhappy to accept a counter offer, because that level of resentment, I think, even if you're not consciously thinking about it, is somewhere in the back of your brain going, why did it have to get to that point for them to say, yes, I'm worth it?
I'm gonna take that into my relationships. I mean, like that's deep.
Hmm. And that's why
That's
when they wouldn't
incredible.
work with me on my schedule, I knew it was a sign that they were never going to see the worth that I thought I brought to the company, and it just made sense to leave.
That's amazing. All right, so we've talked about like where you started, your origin story. We've talked about like kind of the trials and tribulations. So just give a brief overview of where you are now and like what you're looking to do in the future.
That's awesome. So I left that company and I wanted to make a go of freelance writing. For a while, I actually freelanced with the company, taking some of the overflow of the work that had been divided between my remaining colleagues. And so I actually got fired from a job I didn't have when the entire creative team was let go. So that was a funny story. Uh, Couple short months later, wound up going on retainer with a big name client in the internet marketing industry. Wound up going on to grow his team, hire additional copywriters, lead the team for a while. Spoke on stage at big, like 1,000-person events, teaching copywriting, teaching marketing, helping people with their businesses. Eventually started coaching uh, new digital business owners and free, like creative freelancers, like copywriters, like designers, excuse me, on how to set up their business and run it like a business versus a freelance side hustle. Because I think there's a danger zone with people that are coming to entrepreneurship from being an employee, in that they only know how to think like an employee. So it's not really their fault. But learning to think like a business owner is an entirely different skill set that a lot of people don't know they're missing when they go into business for themselves. So that's really, I worked with that internet marketing leader for quite some time. And late last year, I left his team, opened up opportunity for another writer to take over, uh, started my podcast, and really shifted my focus to working with these creative entrepreneurs who, they're stuck in a job and they're scared to leave. They don't think they can master the business skills because they're true creatives and math hurts my head. Um, and people that are like deathly afraid that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'll figure it out. I'm scared to fail. Like, please come to me, my children. I will help you. I've failed in every way imaginable. I have solutions. Let's do this.
That's amazing. So for people who are interested in listening to you, what is the name of your podcast? And I will link in the description below.
It's called Permission to Kick Ass. Most of the time, when everybody hears that, they're like, yeah, yeah, that sounds like an Angie podcast. Cool.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really enjoyed our conversations, and I hope to have you back on in a few years and see what's going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Take care.